When did you enter the service?
I enlisted in what was then the Air Corps on June 11th of 1940.
And you volunteered, or you were?
Yes, it was before they started the draft. And,
Oh, I see. Why the Air Corps? Were you?
I was always interested in aviation from as far back as I can remember. And I had a friend here that had gone down to Chanute Field, gone through the aircraft mechanics course, and that was what I was interested in until I could get into flying. Flying was just seemed like it was beyond my reach at that point anyway, and probably the only way that I could possibly get into it would be with the Air Corps, which later became Air Force.
So you hadn't flown then before?
No. I'd had a couple of rides in barnstorming airplanes, but that was all.
Yeah. So you went through basic training then?
I went through basic about 2 weeks. It was about all I had then before I started into the school.
Okay.
And school was, I remember, 6 months long, both aircraft and engine. And as soon as I got out of that, they put me into instructing in the school. So I instructed then for the next year and a half until I could get into cadets.
Okay. Where did you go through training?
That was at Chanute Field.
Oh.
The cadet training went down to Kelly Field to start with for the pre-flight training. Took my primary training in El Reno, Oklahoma, just west of Oklahoma City, and up to Enid, Oklahoma for basic, and Pampa, Texas, way out in the Panhandle for advanced. It was twin engine advanced. I kind of wanted to go into single, but they had some word on that where you went to. So
I'm just going to backtrack and ask you, what did you instruct in? What type of airplane?
this was mechanics. You mean when I was still enlisted before cadets?
Oh.
I was instructing mechanics, aircraft mechanics.
Okay. And then, could you tell me the airplanes that you trained in?
Yeah, the primary training was a Fairchild PT-19. Basic training was called a BT-13 and 15. There were two of them. They were similar aircraft, just different engines. Advanced, we had Beechcraft AT-10 and a Curtiss AT-9 and a Cessna, call it Bobcat now, the 17 designation on it was a 17.
And those were all single engine?
No, they were twin. The primary and basic were single, and advanced was two engine.
I see. And how long did each of those stages take?
They were 2 months each. We got about 70 hours in each phase of it.
Oh, so how often you were flying? Pretty much every day then?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a very busy schedule. You had to do your drills and physical training and ground school and flying, so it was a full day all the time.
And what, after you were all done with your training, you were assigned?
Yeah, they came out then again with assignments, and I was immediately named to instructing again. I wanted to go into transport since I had been in the multi-engine. I was about the first name read off for instructing, so
So,
we went down to Randolph Field then to what they called Central Instructor School, and went through another 6-week course there in instructing. And I was assigned a base in Turner Field, Georgia, Montgomery. Well, no, can't think of the name of it. Anyway, I was only down there a month, and I transferred up to just south of Indianapolis, Freeman Field, in Indiana. And I instructed there in the same type of aircraft for a while, at AT-10s and the AT-17, and then we got B-25s, and I started instructing the takeoff procedures for carriers, like Doolittle did on the carrier for bombing Japan. I instructed there until they closed the base in early 1945. Then I went through a transition on the old Martin B-26. They later named another a North American B-26, but the one I went through was Martin B-26. From there I went to a pool at Randolph again, waiting to go overseas on the A-26, which later became the B-26. And while we were there, the production was a little too slow, so they took the highest time people out of the pool, sent us down to Sebring, Florida for B-17 training, and then on to Montgomery, Alabama for B-29 training. And while I was in the training, they signed the peace over in Japan, so I didn't finish or didn't complete the B-29 training, but I was about halfway through.
I'm not familiar with the B-26.
The B-26, the Martin B-26, was a very short-winged airplane, and looked like a cigar. They called it a flying cigar. A couple other names, which I won't give it. But the A-26 in the North American was originally designed as an attack fighter bomber type, and then it was later given just the bomber designation.
That was a single engine then?
No, they were twin.
How large were they?
Similar to a B-25, just a little bigger maybe.
Oh.
Yeah. The A-26 would have been a little smaller. The Martin B-26 probably just a little bigger.
I see. Were there any? Did you enjoy the flying?
Very much, yeah.
The instructing that didn't get tedious at times, or?
No, not really. You're always working with different students, and the program varied from. I was teaching the twin engine flying. They had just come out of single engine, and we'd go into instrument work, and it was a pretty interesting program. Yeah.
How many students would you have at any one particular time?
It's usually 5 and maybe 6 in a class.
You were strictly their flight instructor, or you didn't
Yeah.
go through the ground schooling with them also?
No.
Okay.
No. The ground school is a separate department. They usually there would be one morning ground school session, and then we would be flying with the other group while they were out. And in the afternoon ground school session, we'd get the morning session for flying. So
I see. Let's see. So you always stayed in the States then? You were never...
I never got overseas. No, I was training to go over, and fortunately it ended before that.
Yeah.
At the time I wanted to go overseas, but I guess after it was over I wasn't too sorry that I hadn't gone over. So.
The B-29 was a new design that was...
Yeah, that was the biggest airplane available at that time. Big 4-engine, kind of reminded you of a freight train taking off.
Yeah. Was that quite a transition? Were there a lot of new features?
Yeah, but I'd gone through the B-17, which is another 4-engine and that was part of the training to go into the B-29. So it was just getting acquainted with the instrumentation and the way the thing handled. They all have little quirks that you have to kind of...
Anything in particular that sticks out in your mind? Any little quirks?
Well, the B-26, the Martin B-26 was right at the takeoff point. If you lost an engine, you just didn't have any chance of being able to control it. It'd just roll right over on you. So it was pretty critical at that point. B-17s were very easy to fly. They were just a big old Cub type airplane. They were easy to land and take off. B-29 was a little more it didn't have the same flight characteristics, so you had to be with it a little more. They all have different foibles, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
You just have to get used to them. And then the systems on them, you have to learn that in ground school, and so that you know how the hydraulics and electronics and everything in them work. And they're always a little different. So.
Through any time of your training, do you remember any time that, like, an engine out or
Yeah,
where you ran into trouble?
I had a few. One time I had a student on a cross-country, it was a low-level cross-country training. We were flying at 100 or 200 feet, and the engine started going out on us, and I could see that it was going bad, so I had the student climb on up to a couple thousand feet, and at that point it was starting to throw oil and missing real badly, so we shut it down. And that was on the Twin Beach, and it didn't really have enough power to maintain altitude on one engine. You could stretch it, and that was about all. You couldn't figure on going any great distance, and that was why I had him climb up so we would have a little altitude before we had to shut it off. And from that point on, it was just a gradual descent with the one engine running, and to get to the airport. We had one or two auxiliary airports where we would shoot landings and things that we could have set down in if we saw that we couldn't make the main one, but we got it back all right. And then there was a few other occasions with the bigger airplanes, but that one was that was probably my first one where we really lost the engine, so probably the most memorable. But really, through my whole career, I didn't have very many of them fail on me. Later in the commercial flying, the airline, a couple of them quit on me, but there I had 4 engines, so there was no big problem.
When you left the service, how many hours had you accumulated by then?
Had 1,270 hours at that point.
And right away you were hired by an airline, or?
No, I came back up here and run the airport for a few years. The airport at that time was south of town, and I was running a flying service for some group in Ladysmith, and that made me, it was essentially manager of the airport and the flying service.
I see. Was it much of a transition then to go into commercial?
Not a lot, but it was different. But I had decided that I had to leave here. You know, there wasn't enough here to keep me satisfied anyway. I went back to school and get my civilian license in mechanics. And I got that, then I went on the same school. It was Spartan School of Aeronautics in Tulsa. Got my instrument rating, and I'd gone to work down in Tulsa then, overhauling, and down in Tucson, Arizona, overhauling P-51 engines over on Rolls-Royce. And while I was there, I got word that American Airlines was hiring, so I sent in an application, and 2 weeks later I was in school with them. And from that time, 31 years with American Airlines.
I see. You said that you had to get your instrument rating, so the military didn't carry over until...
No, I got a commercial rating through the military when I got out, just by applying for it.
Okay.
But they wouldn't give an instrument rating, even though I had what we called a green card. I had gone through an extensive instrument training with the Air Force, Air Corps, but FAA wouldn't honor that part of it. So.
I see. Could you tell me a little bit about what planes did you fly in the airlines?
The first one I flew was a Convair 240. It was a twin engine, 40 passenger. And I went up, flew a DC-4 and DC-6s that went into 4-engine. Those were Douglas airplanes, and Douglas DC-7. Then the jets started coming in, and flew the Lockheed Electra. It was a turboprop type, and then into a Convair 990, a Boeing 727, 707, and then into the Douglas DC-10. And I stayed on that until I retired.
What year did you retire?
1982. We had to retire at 60. Can't go beyond that.
Was that enjoyable flying?
Very much.
Very much.
Yeah. I guess I enjoyed. I just felt like I was so fortunate to get into flying and be able to stay with it all those years.
And you still fly?
Still fly on a small airplane, one that I built. And anything else that comes along.
Yeah. Anything you get a chance to. Huh? Okay, I think that about does it, and I thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. That's a pretty watch.